The episode begins with Haruka frantically running from monsters, while he begins to narrate the events that led to his current situation. He explains that his story started back when he was still in school. Despite being surrounded by classmates, Haruka always felt a deep sense of loneliness because he deliberately avoided interacting with others. In his class, there were various groups: popular students, gamers, fashion enthusiasts, and gym lovers. But none of these groups appealed to Haruka. He felt out of place and disconnected. One day, however, everything changed when a magical circle appeared in the classroom, engulfing the entire room. For a moment, Haruka felt a rush of excitement, thinking this scenario resembled a light novel he had recently read. Although he thought traveling to another world could be troublesome, he preferred reading about such things rather than experiencing them. He attempted to escape the magic circle by opening the door and heading upstairs, but ultimately found himself in an entirely white room. Perplexed by the emptiness around him, Haruka wondered aloud why no one was there. He expected to see a fat king or a beautiful princess, but instead encountered an old man. Haruka joked that the old man must have gotten lost and ended up in another world by mistake, even suggesting the man might be senile. To his surprise, the old man retorted that he was not senile and informed Haruka that he needed to choose a skill, as his classmates had already done before being sent to the new world. Haruka then noticed a large screen displaying various skills. He discovered that each person was usually given 50 points to allocate to different abilities, but since 43 others had already chosen, most of the valuable skills were gone. Frustrated, Haruka scolded the old man, demanding a better option. In response, the old man offered him the remaining skills, and soon Haruka was transported to the new world. When Haruka woke up, he exclaimed in disbelief that the old man had sent him off so carelessly. He felt unprepared, wishing he had more time to gather equipment. Noticing a bag on the ground, he opened it and found a cloak, which he put on, feeling slightly more equipped for the journey ahead. As he checked his status screen, Haruka realized he needed to roll dice to determine certain attributes. He recalled that the old man had granted him all the remaining skills, including dice. Rolling. After rolling the dice, an MM appeared, leaving him confused. He speculated that it might mean maximum, and when a window popped up asking him to allocate points, he invested them in luck. To his surprise, his luck stat maxed out. However, upon reviewing his other skills, Haruka was disheartened. One of his skills ensured that he would always be alone, preventing him from joining any teams. If he tried, people would run away from him. Another skill allowed him to control creatures, giving him the ability to befriend them. Haruka was taken aback by this, wondering aloud if he would truly survive alone in this world, just as he had been in the real world. Despite his disappointment, Haruka pressed on, deciding to find shelter and food. As he ventured through the dense forest, he noted how the trees blocked his view, making him anxious about potential monster attacks. Suddenly, he remembered the magical contact lenses the old man had given him. When he put them on, he realized they allowed him to see objects and their exact locations, even in the dark. Delighted by this newfound ability, Haruka felt more confident. With the lenses, he could easily locate edible plants and mushrooms. And as he filled his bag, he remarked how finding things had become enjoyable and effortless. After drinking from a river, Haruka notices a cave in the distance. Although he feels slightly apprehensive, he decides to enter and finds it empty. He unpacks his belongings and sets up his magical tent, feeling optimistic as he thinks to himself that he will be able to live comfortably there. With the firewood he gathered earlier, he lights a fire and remarks that the flames should keep monsters at bay. Reflecting on the day's events, Haruka realizes how much has happened and acknowledges his exhaustion, deciding it's time to sleep. But before drifting off, he checks his status and is pleasantly surprised to see that his fire magic has leveled up. The following morning, Haruka wakes up refreshed, thankful that his monster, Rappelling skills kept him safe through the night. After preparing and cooking a meal, he comments on how his survival skills are improving, but he reminds himself that he still needs to secure food and strengthen his defenses. While out foraging, Haruka stumbles upon some medicinal herbs, but is suddenly confronted by small goblins. Though small, Haruka recognizes that they are stronger than him and wonders if he can defeat them. Determined, he decides to strike first, realizing that he can't avoid them forever. Haruka charges at the goblin, using his magic staff and channeling magical energy into it. With a shout, he leaps at the creature and knocks it unconscious. Just as he celebrates, another goblin attacks him. Haruka manages to dodge its strike and finishes it off with a powerful magical blast, successfully defeating both goblins. Later, by the river, Haruka washes his face and reflects on his first battle. While not perfect, it was a good enough victory for him to survive. Exhausted, he heads back to his cave to rest. That evening, he examines the goblin's weapon, which is short and heavy, and concludes that it's useless to him. He checks his status and is pleased to see that he has leveled up to level 2, noting that his progress is quicker than expected. The next morning, Haruka eats breakfast, grumbling about the monotony of his meals. He jokes that the class president would scold him for wanting more variety and being wasteful. Nevertheless, he acknowledges that he solved the immediate problem of hunger and shifts his focus to getting stronger. Haruka doesn't like the idea of leveling up just by getting attacked by stronger monsters, so he decides to train in magic. He feels excited after receiving the forest's blessing, noticing that his body feels lighter, almost as if he's teleporting. Soon after, Haruka encounters another group of goblins. With his improved abilities, he attacks them one by one, marveling at how much stronger he's become since the previous day. He realizes he can now easily defeat 3 goblins in a row. After a long battle, Haruka decides to stop for the day. Satisfied with his magic training, he continues this routine for several days, and by the 5th day, he is able to defeat a goblin with a single blow. He also gathers materials to start building a home, feeling that everything is starting to fall into place. While out one day, Haruka spots a rabbit and chases after it. He manages to catch it, but as soon as he grabs the rabbit, a notification warns him that someone is nearby. To his surprise, his classmates appear. Not wanting to interact with them, Haruka quietly holds the rabbit's mouth shut to avoid making noise. He notices the class vice president among the group and reflects on how he's known her since the first day of school. Despite the situation, he thinks about how much he's changed in this new world. As he watches his classmates from afar, Haruka concludes that in this vast new world, he is truly independent. There's no one to tell him what to do, and nothing can stop him from becoming stronger. Confidently, he declares to himself that he is the only monster hunter in this world. Haruka notices the delinquents getting closer, so he quickly hides in the bushes nearby. Just as he does this, they hear a noise coming from the bushes and decide to investigate. As they move closer, Haruka braces himself, thinking he's about to be caught. Luckily, they only find the bunny he had released earlier, which then runs away. Frustrated, the delinquents leave, disappointed. Later, Haruka sees them gathered by the river, talking. Curious, he listens in on their conversation, hoping not to get involved. He overhears them having inappropriate conversations about the girls in their class. One of the delinquents makes a crude comment about how the deputy class president's breasts are large. Even in this other world, others talk about the girls in the swim club. Haruka worries about the girls, but reassures himself that the class rep is with them, confident she'll see through the delinquents' bad intentions. He explains that the class rep has kept the troublemakers in line since first grade. The delinquents then ask one of the nerds with them, named Tanaka, if they can do whatever they want with their skills. Tanaka, feeling pressured, tells them they can and agrees to teach them more. Haruka watches and thinks Tanaka is being used like a search engine, forced to find information on skills and other things. The delinquents leave with perverted ideas in mind, Heading upstream, Haruka realizes his classmates must be nearby, but he decides he'd rather stay alone. Back in his cave, Haruka notices his loner skill has leveled up to level 2, likely because he hid from his classmates. He's relieved his neat title didn't level up, but feels disappointed with his other messed up job titles. He sees that he's now level 3, but blames his Master of None and Blockhead skills for slowing his progress. He doesn't know what these skills are for, except that Master of None makes him unable to focus on one thing. Though he can do other tasks decently, Blockhead seems like a useless skill. Trying not to dwell on it, he distracts himself with food, but grows frustrated eating mushrooms again, wishing he could have some meat or fish. Later that night, while lying in bed, he hears sounds of fighting outside his cave, unable to sleep because of the noise. He goes out to investigate, thinking that kids should be asleep at this hour. He hopes it's not the delinquents and is surprised to find some nerds surrounded by goblins, struggling to fight them off. Haruka wonders if he should help, but first checks their abilities with his appraisal skill. He sees that the nerds are much stronger than him and are likely to be fine. They even have cheat skills, unlike him. He recalls that back in their old world, his class was filled with top athletes and students with the best grades in the nation, including children of celebrities. He always felt out of place in that group. Just as he's about to leave, he notices some goblins sneaking up behind the nerds. Deciding to step in, he uses his wooden cane to take out the goblins and asks the nerds if they're okay. The nerds, having already handled goblins on their side, thank him awkwardly. They walk with Haruka, thanking him for the help, but Haruka downplays it, saying it wasn't a big deal. He feels awkward since it's been so long since he's spoken to anyone and realizes he's forgotten how to talk normally. Haruka takes the nerds back to his cave, where they're shocked to see how fancy it looks inside. He explains it's all thanks to his earth magic and packing skills. They can't believe he did all of it by himself and think it's unfair he has such a comfortable setup. Haruka then asks what happened to the rest of their classmates. The nerds explain that they've been on the run. When Haruka asks what happened, they start from the beginning. They recall the day they were summoned to this world, feeling confused and unsure of where they were. Soon, they realized they were in another world, just as the god had told them. Some of the girls began crying, thinking of their homes and families, while others were more annoyed, wondering what they would do next, with no clue about how another world works. The nerds, familiar with these situations from manga, checked their stats and recognized their skills. The delinquents demanded the nerds explain the details of the new world or threatened to beat them up. Meanwhile, the class rep stayed calm and kept everyone in line, even under the stressful circumstances. She warned everyone to stay quiet in the forest, but it was already too late. Goblins had found them. Even the class rep struggled to stay calm when she saw the monsters. The delinquents panicked, and some of the girls were terrified. The nerds, knowing these were just low-level goblins from fantasy stories, prepared to fight. They used their skills and knowledge to defend themselves. And seeing this, the jocks joined in, eventually defeating the goblins. After the fight, the class rep suggested moving to a safer place with better visibility, so they relocated to a spot by the river. There, the nerds taught everyone survival skills based on what they knew from manga and light novels. The class rep assigned duties to everyone, and the group slowly adapted to their new life. For a while, everyone worked together and managed to create some sense of normalcy in the new world. But it didn't last long. One day, the girls got tired of doing manual labor and refused to work. The class rep tried talking to the girls, but they refused to listen. Seeing this, other students started skipping their work too, thinking the nerds could handle everything since they were better at it. Despite the class rep's efforts, she couldn't get through to them. Frustrated and overwhelmed, she broke down. From then on, the class rep, the nerds, and a few others did all the work while the rest lazed around at the camp. The nerds were unhappy, especially since they had to fight monsters to level up. They remembered some delinquents had chosen skills like mesmerize and puppetry, which could control others, and were determined to get strong enough to resist them. Meanwhile, Tanaka secretly told the delinquents about their special skills and how to level up by fighting monsters at night. The delinquents planned to unlock these abilities to control others, unaware that the nerds were keeping a close watch. The nerds soon discovered the delinquents' harem plan, easily piecing it together from their crude comments about the girls. The nerds informed the class rep, who decided to raise her own level. A few days later, the delinquents finally unlocked their controlling skills, excited to fulfill their twisted desires. But just as they were about to act, the class rep intervened at the last moment. The delinquents tried using their skills on her, but soon after, they were found lying on the ground, unable to move. The nerds quickly used sealing skills to block their powers, and with their plans exposed, the delinquents were expelled from the camp. Angry, the delinquents launched a surprise attack on the camp, destroying everything and hurting their classmates before leaving, vowing to return. The nerds were devastated, seeing all their hard work ruined. The girls blamed the nerds, saying it was their fault for provoking the delinquents. Others joined in, but the class rep defended the nerds, knowing they weren't to blame. Still, things became awkward, and the nerds decided to leave the camp. Hearing this sad story, Haruka felt bad for the nerds and offered to treat them to a feast. But with only mushrooms to offer, they ate together anyway, spending the next day as a group. Haruka found comfort in the company, realizing it was okay not to be alone sometimes. The following day, the nerds left Haruka's home. They invited him to join them in a nearby town to become adventurers, reminding him how close they had been back in school, often sharing books. Haruka agreed, but declined their offer, feeling that his cursed skills would only hold them back. As they left, Haruka considered visiting the town himself, but decided first to check on the others, since the nerds had been worried about the class rep. Venturing deeper into the forest, he encountered a kobold that bit his hand. Despite some difficulties, he defeated it and continued on, eventually reaching his classmates' old campsite, only to find it abandoned. Using his tracking skills, Haruka followed footsteps across the river, soon spotting the girls. He tried to avoid them, but they saw him and chased after him, expecting them to disrupt his loner life. Haruka was surprised when they politely asked him to stop. They asked if he knew where the nerds were, explaining they wanted to apologize. Haruka, shocked, asked why they suddenly cared. The girls confessed they had realized they were wrong and now understood the nerds had helped them survive. Haruka, unnerved by their sincerity, told them it was too late to catch up with the nerds. Still, they begged him to tell them where the nerds had gone, saying they wanted to make things right. Unsure if they were capable of surviving the journey and fighting monsters, Haruka wondered if they truly meant it. When the girls began crying and pleading for his help, his servitude skill unexpectedly activated, making the three girls his slaves. They followed him around the forest, helping him fight monsters and presenting spell stones like obedient pets, which made Haruka uncomfortable. When he noticed the leader of the girls was injured, he gave her a potion, but she splashed it on him instead. Feeling frustrated and embarrassed, Haruka thought it would be a disaster if the class rep saw him like this. He began wondering how to release the girls from the servitude skill when, suddenly, the class rep arrived. She tried speaking to him, but Haruka was too focused on finding a solution to his servitude problem. It wasn't until she shouted in his ear that he finally noticed her. Meanwhile, the delinquents continued plotting, determined to carry out their sinister plans for the girls and eliminate anyone who stood in their way. Haruka is in a panic, unsure how to break his own spell. Thankfully, the class rep arrives just in time and yells loudly enough to snap him out of it. He tries to call her by name, but can't remember it, which irritates her, and she makes sure to express her annoyance clearly. Soon after, the other class reps catch up, breathless. The leader asks what happened to the preppy girls, who look exhausted, and Haruka is just as curious for an explanation. It becomes clear that Haruka's subjugation skill has left the girls looking like zombies. Realizing the situation, the class rep asks if Haruka used the skill on the preppy girls. Haruka reluctantly nods. She gets upset, reminding him that this ability is only meant for monsters, forcing Haruka to explain it was an accident. The girls give him suspicious looks, doubting his excuse. For a moment, Haruka feels like he's freezing under their cold, judgmental stares. He manages to escape the situation with some effort and tries to leave, but the girls insist he stays. Frustrated, Haruka can't believe this chaotic situation is what he signed up for when he wanted a quiet life in this new world. The class rep shakes Shimazaki, the leader of the preppy girls, until her eyes return to normal. She then calls Haruka back to gather everyone and discuss what's going on. Finally, Haruka is left alone, just like he wanted. He decides to practice his house expansion skill while waiting. Maybe he could even build a base. He gathers mana and activates the skill, but instead of expanding, he ends up buried in the ground with only his head sticking out. The class rep has to dig him out again to hear what Shimazaki told her. Shimazaki explains that Haruka came to help them, and the girls bow down to thank him. Feeling awkward, Haruka asks if he can go home, but the girls scold him, demanding he fulfill the help he promised. Curious, the class rep asks what he meant by that. Haruka explains that he has a house he built with his own hands after arriving in this world. The girls are thrilled by this revelation, and the leader quickly organizes a meeting, leaving Haruka on the sidelines again. The class rep asks how many people can fit in his house. Haruka responds that if 6 people squeeze onto a tatami mat, he could fit around 240, maybe even more if they move the furniture and don't mind crowding the kitchen and bathroom. The girls are fascinated that his house has such rooms, while the leader is shocked that he's living in a mansion in the middle of nowhere. Encouraged by the others, the leader politely asks if they can stay at Haruka's house for the night. Haruka can hardly believe a group of high school girls wants to stay at his place, and the thought messes with his head for a moment, but he agrees. He leads them through the dark, using his location skill, and after a long walk, the girls are out of breath from keeping up with him. Haruka warmly welcomes them to his home. Once they catch their breath, they realize they've arrived at a mansion in the middle of nowhere. The girls are excited, maybe more than anyone else in the story. Haruka finds it strange how much they like his house compared to the nerds. He shows them around, and as he points out the bathroom, most of the girls rush ahead to bathe, tossing their clothes in the air. Haruka watches as dozens of girls bathe together, realizing their time in the forest has turned them wild. With the house full, he sets up a tent outside to find some peace. Just as he starts to enjoy his solitude, the leader of the class reps interrupts to thank him for his support. After the boys left, the girls were anxious, but now they feel calmer. A fancy room, food, and a warm bath did wonders for their spirits. The leader admits she doesn't feel like she's led her group well through the challenges they faced. Haruka reassures her that she protected them tonight, but she replies that she can't do what Oda and the others can. Haruka tells her she doesn't need to. The nerds are practically built for this world. They came prepared. The rest of them are just trying to survive, so she shouldn't compare herself to them. This makes her feel a bit better, but she's still curious. If Haruka can build a mansion in the middle of nowhere, maybe he's the real alien here. Haruka is taken aback by her insight. She bids him goodnight. Later, the girls finally enjoy a proper bath and sleep in comfortable beds, while Haruka gets the least comfortable spot, finding peace in his own little corner. As he settles down, he imagines it's going to be a long night. At dawn, a girl apologizes for waking Haruka up and informs him breakfast is ready. Startled, he wonders why someone is in his tent and asks for just half an hour more of sleep. The girl teasingly moves closer, saying he doesn't seem to want to get up. Feeling awkward, Haruka changes the subject by asking what's for breakfast. She says it's mushrooms and grilled fish. Excited, since he's been eating only mushrooms for days, Haruka accidentally headbutts her as they leave the tent. He skips the apologies and goes straight for the fish. With the first bite, Haruka falls in love with the fish. The girl asks if he hasn't been living near a stream, and he says he has, but he couldn't catch the fish because they're too fast. Curious, he asks if the girls know an easier way to catch them, and they show him a technique that makes the task much simpler. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you're enjoying the story. At the riverbank, one of the girls uses her electric power to instantly kill the fish. Fascinated, Haruka asks her to do it again. As she gathers electricity in her hands, Haruka uses his packaging skill to capture the spell, and then tries it himself on the river. Excited, he celebrates catching fish for the first time, and on top of that, developing his own electric magic. Apparently, with his packaging ability, he can capture any elemental magic and reproduce it in his own way. The girl comments on how impressive this is, and Haruka adds that it's likely a combination of his packaging skill and Master of None ability. Still, he remembers how he was left with the worst powers while everyone else got the best ones, and controlling that electric magic almost made him wet his pants with excitement. Later, Haruka meets with the leader of the girls and asks if they've decided what to do next. She explains that they haven't reached a consensus yet, but it seems like everyone is heading to the city. Haruka figures the girls are trying to catch up with the nerds, and they confirm they need to apologize to them. The leader emphasizes that it would be important to gain a few levels before starting the journey, which Haruka agrees with, since that's his plan as well. The leader thanks him, but clarifies that their goal isn't to chase after Oda. Haruka expresses disappointment, as he would have loved to see a showdown between the girls and the nerds with their strong abilities. Nevertheless, he gathers with them to begin their training journey. First, he asks what level each of them is at, and those at the front show they're between level 16 and 20. 1. Haruka is shocked that the lowest level is still higher than his own, as he's only at level 16. Keeping his word though, he quickly spots 3 kobolds lazing around in a nearby bush and asks the girls to take care of them, as those monsters are only half their level. The girls stretch and prepare for battle, but when the time comes, they are completely defeated. Haruka complains about how pathetic it was, while the girls grumble that no one warned them the creatures would bite. Later, instead of enjoying the peace and quiet in his tent, poor Haruka watches as several girls gather inside for a review of the fight. Eventually, they leave the tent with their confidence restored, except for the purple-haired girl who woke Haruka earlier. She stays behind to apologize, explaining that she was just testing him before. When the boys attacked, she was almost caught, and she wanted to see if Haruka would harm them, but he proved otherwise. She adds that she'll wake him again tomorrow for breakfast. The next morning, Haruka starts his day with fish, while the girls train for their rematch with the kobolds. After the training, some are too exhausted to stand, while others pretend to be sick to avoid combat. However, those who pushed through managed to defeat the kobolds. After their victory, they greet the fallen creatures and start thinking of them as Pete dogs. The group leader then tells Haruka they're ready to head to the city with him, but he never said he was going along. Later, once everything is settled, the girls finally depart. Haruka warns the leader that they have no idea what dangers lie ahead, so they need to stay sharp. That night, in the pouring rain, a student runs frantically, trying to escape someone chasing him. He stumbles over a rock, falls hard, and is soon caught. He screams that he doesn't have the ability the man is looking for, but the pursuer ignores him and attacks. This brings an end to our episode 3. Thanks for watching.
So the next day, Haruka leads the group through the forest, always aware that the bullies could be hiding anywhere, watching them. As the leader, it's his responsibility to ensure everyone's safety. To do that, the best plan is to leave the forest as quickly as possible and reach the city. But it's not just the delinquents who could be a threat. The forest itself holds dangers that aren't easy to avoid. For example, a massive orc suddenly blocks their path. Haruka quickly tells everyone to step back and watch carefully as he takes on the monster alone, showing them moves they should learn. As Haruka charges forward, the orc swings its club, misses him. Haruka dodges and uses the moment to gauge the orc's speed. The nerds had said that this race of creatures was highly resistant, and the only way they had ever defeated one was through magic. With that in mind, Haruka cans his menu, searching for a useful spell. He finds 4 elemental options: fire, water, earth, and air. Haruka had learned these abilities after using them for simple tasks, like cleaning floors in his house. It turns out even seemingly pointless techniques can be useful, and Haruka was getting good at turning them to his advantage. Even though Haruka isn't completely alone in this fight. The creature lets out a cry and collapses to the ground. After this victory, Haruka becomes thoughtful, especially since orcs are supposed to resist physical attacks. Yet he just defeated one with a stick. The girls gather around trying to understand what just happened since they didn't learn much from such an unusual fight. Haruka can't explain it either, so he promises to rely on magic next time and fight properly. Soon the group encounters another orc further down the path. This time Haruka decides to test his fire magic. He hurls a fireball at the creature and wins again, leaving everyone confused about how easily he's handling these monsters. Just like before, the girls don't learn anything from the battle, because Haruka is so overpowered that he doesn't solve problems like normal people. So by nightfall though, the girls aren't as frustrated as earlier, especially since they now have roasted meat to enjoy as they relax at their makeshift campsite. Haruka, meanwhile, sets a trap using earth magic to keep enemies away, creating a deep pit. His magical tents not only repel monsters but can also detect their presence, so the girls would be safe. With everything prepared, Haruka focuses on planning the next day's route using a map he learned to summon with his evaluation skill. While studying the map and the river's location, he senses enemies nearby and rushes to check. From a distance, he sees some male figures and assumes they're the bullies, making him sweat nervously. But as they get closer, he realizes they're just athletes approaching him in a friendly manner. Haruka asks what they're doing here, thinking they're after someone or something in the forest. The athletes feel offended, explaining they're not here for any girl, but for Haruka himself. The girls in Haruka's group, however, don't trust anyone else from their class. Putting that aside, the leader of the athletes tells Haruka about a dangerous skill roaming the forest, one even worse than marionette or hypnosis. Haruka wonders what could be worse than those, and the athlete mentions a skill called abduction. It's not the delinquents who have it, but someone from outside their group. Haruka raises his hand threateningly, calling them idiots for not realizing he might be the one with the skill. The athletes agree it's better for Haruka to have such power than for the bullies to get their hands on it. They ask if Haruka knows how to use the spell, and feeling embarrassed, Haruka explains that he can only use the magic of servitude, which the athletes don't understand. And even so, they trust that as long as Haruka holds the skill, nothing too bad will happen. Assuming he won't use it for anything major, they casually dismiss its importance. Slightly offended, Haruka warns them not to underestimate loners, though the athletes aren't looking for trouble. So they only came to warn the group to be careful about the abduction skill and to keep an eye on the bullies. So before leaving, they ask Haruka to apologize to the girls on their behalf for all the problems during the class camp. The boys then say goodbye and leave, while the class representative, who had been quietly listening to the entire conversation, stays behind. The next morning, Haruka gathers the group to continue their journey, noticing the girls are in better spirits than usual. This leaves Haruka deep in thought. As he walks away from the group, the class representative approaches him, bringing up the conversation he had with Kazagaze's group. Haruka explains that they apologize for everything, but the girl has something else on her mind. She apologizes to Haruka in advance, taking her time to talk about something serious. Haruka quickly realizes she's the one with the abduction skill, which surprises her since she had asked Oda's group to keep it a secret. Now that Haruka knows, she asks why he helped her despite knowing this. Haruka doesn't understand why she's afraid, so she explains that the abduction skill lets you steal someone's ability after you kill them, making it a terrifying and powerful technique. Haruka points out that the nerds didn't seem scared when they sealed the puppet and hypnosis skills of the bullies, but left her with the abduction skill. This shows they believed only she should have such power. Moved to tears, the class representative thanks Haruka for everything he's done. Haruka, embarrassed, quickly runs off, insisting that he's not to blame for her crying. Haruka doesn't understand why she should be scared, so the class rep explains that her skill allows her to steal the target's ability after taking their life, making it incredibly overpowered and Sinnoh's technique. It's undoubtedly terrifying. Haruka then points out that the nerds weren't afraid either, since they sealed off the bully's puppet and hypnosis skills but left her with the kidnapping skill. This shows they trusted only her with that power. Moved by his words, the class rep starts crying and blames Haruka for making her so emotional. Haruka, embarrassed, runs away while defending himself from the accusation. The truth is, she's grateful for everything he's done. Later, the group continues their journey toward the river. When they reach a spot Haruka had in mind, he decides to test something he's been thinking about. Without hesitation, he dashes in a certain direction and activates his magic infusion. He uses the magic weight skill to lighten his magic, allowing him to leap high into the air, jumping from branch to branch until he reaches an impressive height. Of course, Haruka still hasn't learned how to fly, no matter how much he's tried, so he crashes to the ground, nearly losing all his HP. If it weren't for his magic infusion, he would have died, but at least he figured out a new path by playing bird for a few seconds. Still a bit dazed from the fall, Haruka tries to explain to the class rep how he returned to the group all battered up. Regardless, at dawn, the group sets off again, this time taking a much faster route. Along the way, they experience various events, such as the girls from the class taking the group bath and being chased by a trio of orcs at one point, but no matter what happens, the group stays strong and united as they move toward their destination. After the storm, calm finally arrives. In other words, they find the forest exit and the girls cheer in celebration. Haruka, however, stays cautious, unsure of what dangers might be lurking in the hills. Checking his menu, he discovers that he's learned a new skill called airwalk, thanks to his performance the day before. Without delay, he tests the technique, scanning the area to make sure it's safe before continuing the journey with the girls. So as she looks around, Haruka spots a group of locals in trouble. However, just because they're being attacked by monsters doesn't mean they're good people. Haruka considers not helping them, but the girls vote on it, and the class rep commits to fighting if the group turns out to be bandits. Knowing she'd react this way, Haruka decides to go alone to avoid putting his companions at risk. To reach the group in danger, he repeats the magic he used the day before to run higher, this time adding a small tornado to boost his speed. The problem is that the tornado blows up, pulling the class rep along with him. She desperately grabs his cloak to avoid crashing to the ground. As if that wasn't enough, the two realize they can't stop their flight as planned, and they crash near the group's carriage like a meteor. After the dust settles, the local men are left bewildered, though Haruka managed to defeat the monsters surrounding them, and apparently knocked out the class rep as well. Soon, the leader of the group, a man with black hair, introduces himself as After. Another man names himself Gadok. Haruka asks why they were attacked, and After explains that merchants were ambushed by a pack of great green wolves, so the guild placed a bounty on the monsters. The group thought they could make money from it, but from what Haruka sees, they were wrong. With nothing else to be done, After tells everyone to collect what's left of the spoils. After the battle, Haruka roasts a mushroom for Gadok, who excitedly remarks that they're buffshrooms, mushrooms that provide buffs and are extremely valuable. Surprised, Haruka serves the rest of the group, and soon the girls feel as good as new. Watching this, Haruka begins to feel uneasy about these two men being in a group with such beautiful girls. Shortly after, the rest of the group catches up to Haruka, and the girls are delighted to meet an elf for the first time. The locals then guide them to the much-anticipated city called Amui. To mark this special moment, the group draws a line in the dirt to symbolize the beginning of a new life, and they leap over it, jumping toward their future. So meanwhile, the bullies continue leveling up in the forest, searching for the girls to prepare for the long-awaited showdown. A boy who had been captured by them advises the delinquents to break the seal on their puppet and hypnosis skills. However, the problem is that they need someone with the sealing skill to do it. In other words, the bullies must find the nerds who know how to break the seal before they can get their revenge. Strangely, during this conversation, the boy accompanying the delinquents lets out a sinister laugh. At the same time, the athletes watch the enemies from afar, realizing that nothing good will come of this. So this brings an end to Ep 4. As always, thanks for watching. When the group returns to Amui, they're captivated by its beauty and vibrant energy, finally realizing they're truly in another world. Everyone is thrilled, except Haruka, who feels the city isn't quite right for a loner like him. The girls are especially enchanted by the city's charm, with its unique shops, clothing stores, and stores filled with unfamiliar items. As the excitement settles, the class representative reminds them there's an important task to handle. While she hurries to take care of it, Haruka finds comfort in knowing he safely brought everyone here. Thinking his mission is done, Haruka relaxes in the shade with a drink while two girls admire the buildings, joking that they look like cupcakes they could eat. The rep has to step in, reminding them stones aren't the best for digestion. Struggling to keep up with the group's excitement, she gently scolds Haruka for relaxing in such an unfamiliar place. She then blows a whistle, ordering the girls to line up and salute, ready to announce the next steps. Their first task is to head to the Adventurers Guild to sell their collected items and register as adventurers. They'll then need to find a place to stay for the night. The next day, they'll ask around about Oda's group. Hearing this, Shimazaki, the leader of the popular girls, asks why Oda's group isn't a priority. Feeling cornered, the rep explains that wasn't her intention. Haruka takes the chance to tease that Shimazaki is really worried about the nerds, which she denies, embarrassed to admit the truth. Together, they head to the Adventurers Guild, where Haruka feels nervous, especially when a man informs him that the guild master wants to see him. He asks the rep to handle registration while he meets with Godek, the master. Haruka, trembling, confirms his name. But to his surprise, Godek thanks him for saving After's group, relieving Haruka from his previous fears. Relaxed, Haruka goes to sell his magic stones. He dumps dozens on the counter, but the staff member warns him that it'll take until tomorrow to assess them all. By this point, the girls have all registered as adventurers, impressing After and Garrick by reaching above level 30. Shimazaki nudges Haruka to register, and he's finally excited to join an official group, but he learns he needs to be level 10 to register. As he's only level 9, he despairs, begging for an exception, but the staff says he must be at least level 20 to go solo, or at level 30 to be a true adventurer. Haruka, frustrated by the setback, watches as the rep takes charge of finding lodging for everyone. By evening, they arrive at a guild-recommended hotel, and Haruka isn't thrilled by its strange look. Inside, a young receptionist welcomes them, and Haruka wonders if it's a roadside inn, but the rep tells him to keep quiet. Later, Haruka finds the room comfortable, though he misses the forest. The next morning, 19 days after they arrived in this world, the group has breakfast, and the rep mentions that the city is relatively safe and full of shops. Seeing the girls' happiness, Haruka feels they'll do well here, while he plans to return to the forest once he sells his stones. At the guild, the staff tosses a bag of money on the counter, apologizing that it's all they can offer now, since they're still counting the stones. They offer to pay him in installments. Haruka, accepting, reflects that he's just earned over 52,000 in Japanese currency. With their newfound funds, the rep announces it's time to buy essentials, and Gadek suggests a shop where they can spend. Haruka imagines a shop filled with women, but soon finds himself in a dungeon-themed store. Though the shopkeeper is a bit quirky, Haruka enjoys testing an invisibility cloak, power gloves, a fire staff, and a mana-cutting sword. He finally finds a necklace called 7 Shops, which allows him to combine the effects of 7 pieces of equipment into one. Haruka becomes even more obsessed with the necklace, but the class rep interrupts, ordering him to return to the hotel immediately since it is bedtime. Frustrated, he asks if he can at least try one more item, the mistletoe twig, which strengthens magical staffs and rods. However, as he grabs it, he accidentally activates it and fuses all the equipment without paying for the enchanted necklace. The shop owner is furious, stating the necklace is worth over 10 million heals. Godek and the class rep attempt to negotiate a discount, and by the 20th, Haruka is completely broke from his mishap, even though there is still so much he wants to buy. Luckily, the shopkeeper agrees to reduce the price to 8 million, but Haruka is now flat broke. If he wants to gather more magic stones, he cannot leave the city without registering as an adventurer and getting a permit. And if he tries sneaking out with the girls, the class rep will not allow it. Faced with this, Haruka decides a city life is not for him, and he needs to return to the forest. At least he has his invisibility cloak fused with his basic outfit, which will be incredibly useful. With it, Haruka sneaks past all the girls and heads toward the city wall. Just as he is about to leap over, a few classmates call out to him, causing him to crash into the wall. He brushes this off as he and the girls witness one of their group, almost stripping in public to test out a new outfit. Haruka rushes over, stopping her before she causes a scene. In the end, his first escape attempt fails. On the 21st, the girls prepare for their first outing. Haruka asks to join, but the class rep refuses due to his failed escape the day before. Once they leave, he slips past the gate guard with his invisibility cloak and finally makes it outside. Ecstatic, he dashes back to the forest, ignoring every obstacle, including a group of bandits attacking a carriage with a defenseless girl inside. The bandits attack him, Not wanting witnesses forcing Haruka to fight back, he summons a fire bullet, quickly taking them down and heading for the forest. Afterward, he notices his wooden staff has evolved into a cane, growing much stronger, likely due to the mistletoe twig he activated at the shop. Or perhaps the fire staff he fused with also had an effect. But the bandits stand up again, realizing their opponent is just a level 9 boy. They prepare to use weapon skills, techniques requiring level 20 and above. The first bandit uses slash, the second uses double, and the third attacks with dash. Haruka notices these are powerful skills, but the thugs do not know how to wield them well, so they quickly wear themselves out, losing by their own mistakes. Haruka realizes that weapon skills are powerful, but these enemies lacked control. The girl from the carriage thanks him, introducing herself as Muriel, a noble with an odd personality that Haruka cannot quite grasp. She explains that she is the daughter of a local lord and asks him to accompany her for the rest of her journey since she does not feel safe after the attack. She is eager to reward him for his help, and though Haruka wanted to return to the forest, her offer convinces him to assist. In the carriage, Muriel asks where he is from, so he describes it as a horrible place with a bad guild where they do not even let visitors leave freely. Hearing this, Muriel starts crying. She is the daughter of the lord Haruka just insulted. Oh, and the carriage is heading straight back to Aomori. Realizing this, Haruka panics and tries to get out, but Muriel insists on rewarding him for saving her. Meanwhile, the athletes and bullies clash in the forest, with the leader of the athletes struck by an enemy's blade. If you enjoyed this, drop a comment and subscribe for more. Following the loss of their first ally, the group realized the situation was far more serious than anticipated. The blade that struck down the boy didn't belong to the bullies, but rather to an independent figure on the battlefield who acted autonomously. This swordsman swiftly dispatched the next bully, driving his sword into his opponent's torso, and downed another shortly afterward. Despite the danger, the remaining bullies continued their attack, furious at how easily their companions had fallen. Predictably, the mysterious swordsman quickly cut down the remaining 2 in the blink of an eye. Realizing their peril, the athletes panicked and tried to escape. However, the swordsman circled in front of them, making it clear that no one would leave unless he allowed it. Turning back to Haruka, he was still reluctant to return to Aomori, the last place he wanted to be. Muriel, noticing his hesitation, made a disappointed face, questioning whether he really needed to be so dramatic about it. Haruka, feeling guilty, admitted that her expression wasn't fair. Her puppy dog eyes made it impossible for him to refuse. He finally arrived at the Lord of Omori's mansion, an intimidatingly large house that made him nervous. Observing a painting on the wall, he wondered if it depicted the Lord and his wife, who appeared very happy. All Haruka wanted, however, was to leave as soon as possible. Just as he was sneaking towards the nearest exit, Muriel reappeared, questioning him about leaving without waiting for her to change, as she had requested. Haruka tried to lie, claiming he was just going to wait outside, but Muriel saw through his excuse, accusing him of trying to escape. As Haruka continued to deny it, Muriel, losing patience, firmly asserted that she would make sure he received his reward, so he needed to stay put. To prove her point, Muriel led him to a lavish banquet table, and Haruka abandoned his thoughts of escape to enjoy the food. Later, Muriel asked a maid to bring the cash reward for saving her. Knowing Haruka had no official identity in these lands, she also gave him an Aomori identity card, allowing him free entry into the city whenever he pleased. In exchange, she only asked that he remember the town's name from now on. Haruka, however, was more focused on the delicious pudding before him. Embarrassed, Muriel quietly noted that she had dressed up for him, hoping he'd pay her a bit more attention. On the 22nd, Haruka returned to the inn where his group was staying, explaining that he hadn't tried to escape at all. Instead, he had been invited to the city lord's mansion. The girls, suspicious, questioned why he had been invited. Haruka feigned ignorance, which seemed to satisfy some of them, and they left for a mission. Still, the class representative warned him not to leave the city. Haruka, with his usual carefree attitude, promised he understood. Alone once again, Haruka grinned mischievously and prepared for another escape attempt. Now equipped with the invisibility cloak and his new identity card, he headed for the gates of Aomori, but decided to spend some of his reward money on supplies and food, avoiding mushrooms for once. Before leaving, he left a letter for the class representative, explaining he was going to check on the athletes in the forest and asking the girls to continue training in his absence. When he reached the forest, a burly soldier blocked the exit, but Haruka showed his new identity and was allowed through. He finally made his way to the forest, enjoying the familiar sights, the old mushrooms growing in the underbrush, the fish in the river, and the usual lurking monsters. Relieved to be back, Haruka felt at home. Hurrying to his cave, he was interrupted by a large orc that tried to attack him, but he easily defeated the creature. He noted that it was strange to find an orc here, as they usually inhabited the deeper parts of the forest. Regardless, he found his new equipment from Omui useful and continued his journey. As the sun began to set, he noticed something unusual, a bloodstain on a rock. He guessed it wasn't from the nerds, as they were known for being ice-cold professionals, so he assumed it came from the athletes. Following the trail, he soon found the injured athletes lying on a rock. Seeing they were alive, he used several mushroom-based healing potions to revive them. As the leader regained consciousness, he recognized Haruka and asked if the girls were safe. Haruka assured him they were, thanks to the athletes' sacrifices. Kazukaze, the athletes' leader, was grateful for the chance to help the class. Haruka complimented him, calling them the best athletes the class could hope for. As night fell, Haruka learned that all the bullies had been killed, but no one knew the whereabouts of the nerds. The mysterious swordsman who killed the bullies had also taken all their weapons. Kazukaze speculated that the swordsman was a genius, likely planning the entire scheme in advance. He suspected that this swordsman was targeting the class representative, as she possessed an overpowered skill called abduction, which allowed her to steal an enemy's abilities upon killing them, a highly coveted ability. However, Haruka felt uneasy, as he thought only he and the nerds knew she had the skill. The athletes had simply assumed she possessed it after hearing the swordsman ask about her. The mysterious swordsman had let the athletes live, hoping they would eventually seek out the class representative, giving him a way to track her. Instead, the athletes had chosen to wander the forest to avoid falling into the enemy's trap and nearly ended up dead. The group realizes that their mysterious enemy will surely follow the blood trail straight to their location. Despite his reluctance, the team leader believes that if they join forces, they have a chance to win this fight. Haruka, however, has no desire to get involved. He only wishes to live alone and peacefully in the forest. Yet, he understands that he can't ignore what's happening. With that resolve, Haruka announces that he will help, but he plans to face the threat alone rather than with the athletes. He urges them to return to the city and join the girls. After they leave, he acknowledges that it would have been safer to keep the athletes at the rear, but he realizes that if they all fall to this swordsman, no one will be left to protect the girls. Meanwhile, the girls search for the lone wanderer around Omui, though he left a note explaining his plans. Still, the class representative can't help but worry about him. Haruka, back on his own, remembers hearing from the athletes about the swordsman's weapon skill. While powerful, this skill has a vulnerability. Once activated, it can't be cancelled, leaving the user open to attack. Haruka considers how to exploit this weakness, but realizes he needs to level up to match his opponent. On his journey, he defeats some goblins, but it's not enough. He needs stronger foes. Then he encounters the Goblin King, a powerful enemy that might offer enough experience to bridge the gap. Cautious not to be struck by the Goblin King's massive club, Haruka finds an opening to use his spell, Magic Envelope, which combines several spells into one. He strikes a devastating blow, defeating the Goblin King. To his surprise, the Goblin Emperor then appears, a level 50 creature far beyond his level 9. Haruka knows he can't face such a formidable creature head-on, yet he's uncertain if he can outrun it either. He decides to use his previous tactic, blending all his available skills into a single powerful magic. Charging forward, he lands an attack that seems to deal damage, but the monster stands again relatively unfazed. The Goblin Emperor retaliates with a fierce attack that slashes Haruka's face, forcing him to dodge to avoid a fatal blow. Seeing an opportunity, he counterattacks, reducing the Emperor's health by nearly half. However, the creature quickly starts to heal itself and unleashes a powerful skill that sends Haruka flying back, colliding with several trees. Barely hanging on, Haruka remembers he can't give up, his friends depend on him. Gathering his remaining strength, he launches one final assault on the Goblin Emperor. Hours later, as the sun rises, Haruka, exhausted, stands victorious over his enemy. Shouting in relief, he celebrates his new level, now at 11. He returns to his cave, eager to test the skills he gained. His new Magic Envelope skill now allows him to attack without any delay once he selects a skill, covering the vulnerability left by weapon skills. Later, a man approaches Haruka's dwelling. As he draws nearer, he lowers his hood, revealing himself to be Tanaka, the boy who had once appeared to be the bullied victim. However, it turns out Tanaka had far more complex motives than merely enduring bullying. Meanwhile, the girls return to Omui after another day of hunting. only to find the athletes waiting at the city wall. There, Kakizaki explains that Haruka stayed behind to face the enemy himself. In the forest, Haruka greets Tanaka with a sarcastic welcome. Tanaka, lamenting that he still hasn't reached the class representative, admits he went through great lengths to infiltrate the bully gang and manipulate them all. Haruka realizes that Tanaka orchestrated everything. He used the bullies to divide the class, and when Haruka demands to know what happened to the other men besides the athletes, Tanaka coldly reveals that they are all dead. With a smirk, Tanaka declares he has no time to waste on someone like Haruka, who ends up with weak skills. He's only focused on reaching the abduction skill. Enraged, Haruka raises his weapon to prevent him from leaving. Tanaka, now prepared to fight, decides to kill Haruka right then and there. Tanaka demonstrated his power with flair, lifting rocks effortlessly from the ground, creating a billowing cloud of dust around him. Smiling with confidence, he reminded Haruka of the terrifying abilities he'd mastered in the White Room. Unlike Haruka, whom he called a lone wolf, Tanaka claimed to use a vast array of techniques and was unafraid to use them. With a flick of his wrist, Tanaka hurled rocks at Haruka. Simultaneously, he activated his interference ability, a voice-based skill that temporarily disrupted Haruka's movements. Haruka's situation grew precarious, especially as his classmates watched helplessly from afar. When one of them tried to rush to his aid, Kazakaza stopped her, reassuring her that Haruka could handle it alone. Haruka, however, was barely dodging the assault. Every step felt heavy under the weight of Tanaka's interference, yet he managed to evade most of the projectiles. Impressed yet condescending, Tanaka commented that he hadn't expected Haruka to dodge so well, though he doubted his luck would last much longer. Despite the taunts, Haruka clung to his determination, keeping himself from defeat. Seeing Haruka's resilience, Tanaka demanded to know when he first grown suspicious of him. Haruka explained that he found it strange for a math prodigy to associate with bullies. Smiling, Tanaka praised Haruka's sharpness, admitting that he'd exploited his powers to manipulate those around him. With a flourish, Tanaka ensnared Haruka's foot with roots sprouting from the ground. Declaring the fight over, he set a blaze around Haruka, disappointed that his opponent hadn't been more of a challenge. Yet from the heart of the fire, Haruka emerged unscathed, revealing a newfound resistance thanks to a mistletoe vine he'd picked up by chance, which absorbed hostile magic. Seizing this unexpected advantage, Haruka attacked with his cane, but Tanaka summoned a sword and blocked him easily, sneering at Haruka's moment of boldness. Deciding to up the ante, Tanaka rotated between weapons, a sword, spear, and scythe, confusing Haruka with a rapid, ever-shifting assault pattern. Eventually, a blow struck Haruka, sending him sprawling. As he stood, Haruka analyzed Tanaka's techniques and asked if he'd been using a mimic skill to copy others. Tanaka admitted that Haruka was astute and confessed he aimed to copy any powerful skill he found until he became unstoppable. Haruka knew the longer he fought, the more frightening Tanaka's abilities would grow. Even on the offensive, Haruka struggled, as Tanaka evaded every blow with illusion tricks. Haruka lowered his cane in frustration, which Tanaka saw as an opportunity, charging at him. But Haruka had anticipated this, activating his psych ability to dodge. Through careful observation, Haruka soon realized that Tanaka's skills could only be used a limited number of times before fading. This gave Haruka a new hope. With this insight, he shifted the battle's rhythm, countering Tanaka's moves and pushing him back until he was thrown against a tree. Taking advantage of this opening, Haruka charged, but Tanaka quickly retaliated with a powerful fireball. Though it missed, the blast forced Haruka to retreat. Tanaka, visibly rattled, lashed out, enraged that he was struggling against Haruka. Finally, Tanaka unleashed his strongest weapon, engulfed in a purple aura and cloaked by an ancient death skill that drained life energy. Haruka collapsed, seemingly defeated, as Tanaka laughed and left him on the ground. But, against all odds, Haruka stood up once more, taunting Tanaka for his hasty departure. Baffled, Tanaka insisted that the death skill should have worked. but Haruka explained his unusual skill that nullified negative effects combined with his luck attribute. This formidable combination made Tanaka's powers fail more often than not. Haruka's resilience left Tanaka stunned as he realized his supposed victory had been an illusion all along. Haruka revealed that his lesser-known mannequin skill, which let him move as if imaginary ropes were guiding his body, had helped him dodge Tanaka's attacks. Enraged and desperate, Tanaka launched a series of attacks, but Haruka countered each move effortlessly. Tanaka was mentally shaken, unable to comprehend how his perfect calculations had failed. Tanaka muttered that 1 + 1 always equals 2. That's how things work, Haruka agreed, but reminded him that this wasn't their old world. Here things were different. This reminder took Tanaka back to his school days, where his genius had made classes easy and dull, leaving him isolated from his classmates. He had longed to escape the monotony of school, but when he discovered his abilities in this new world, he saw a chance to change everything. He believed that by taking everyone's strongest abilities, he would finally become unstoppable. If it meant discarding the lives of his classmates, so be it. But now, Tanaka was losing against Haruka, an outsider with seemingly weak skills. Furious, Tanaka attacked with his sword, but Haruka swiftly disarmed him. Haruka moved to finish the fight, but Tanaka's sword mysteriously returned and struck Haruka's shoulder. Seizing this moment, Tanaka attacked repeatedly, chanting that 1 + 1 would always be 2. Haruka then struck Tanaka across the face, remarking that Tanaka had become lazy, relying too much on his borrowed powers. As Haruka's body glowed with a golden aura, he prepared his final move. Tanaka, on his knees, watched as Haruka's invented ability brought the duel to a close. Haruka observed that even the weakest abilities have value before walking away, leaving Tanaka defeated on the ground. Feeling pain and exhaustion, Haruka thought of his friends and apologized, expecting to collapse. But his classmates, whom he affectionately called the nerds, arrived just in time to catch him. They had been searching for him, worried when they learned he was fighting alone. They carried Haruka back through the forest, and he wondered why they'd come for him. Oda explained that while they were away, the class heard Haruka was in the forest and wanted to help. Upon returning to Omui, Haruka received grateful attention from the girls, which he found uncomfortable. They insisted on giving him a bath, while the snobs apologized for trying to expel the nerds and thanked them for their help. Haruka felt he'd ensured everyone's safety, so he tried to slip away, but the class representative caught him, hugging him tightly and asking why he always wanted to leave. Seeing she was relieved, Haruka asked if he had made her cry again. She replied with a smile, happy to have her friend back. Soon, however, Haruka had to face the scolding of all the girls in the class for his reckless actions. Later that night, he dreamed of a mysterious girl emerging from the depths of darkness. The next morning, he crossed paths with his friends who were preparing to search for a rare item rumored to alter perceptions. Haruka, amused, teased Oda, who retorted that he didn't need criticism from someone as solitary as Haruka. The group set off, and Haruka reflected on his recent battles and friendship, thinking it might be time to return to his old life. But as he prepared to leave, he sensed a class representative nearby, her fury burning in her eyes, ready to confront him again. Haruka hoped he wouldn't face yet another scolding like yesterday's, but the class representative reminded him he hadn't yet heard her opinion. She seized the moment, asking why he faced such danger alone, and pleaded with him not to do it again. Haruka knelt and apologized, which the representative accepted with grace. Relieved, he thought that her disapproval was somehow more daunting than facing Tanaka in battle. To avoid her wrath in the future, Haruka decided to seek the rare item the nerds mentioned, one that could change how others see him. With it, he could finally avoid any more unjust reprimands. Meanwhile, in Loromi's mansion, Marielle urged her father to take a break from his work. Loromi acknowledged the need, but noted the city's economy was vulnerable due to increased monster attacks, making it essential to stay vigilant. Suddenly, a soldier who had scouted a dungeon returned with alarming news. An endless wave of monsters was approaching. At that moment, Haruka wandered toward the dungeon, sensing the monsters' presence nearby. He considered them a mere warm-up for the challenges ahead. At the Adventurers Guild, the guildmaster called on the class representative to handle the monsters, while Marielle arrived with urgent news that nearby villages had fallen to an orc horde. Haruka soon faced the advancing orcs, including an orc king he could not defeat with a single blow. But after a few swift attacks, the creature fell, leaving Haruka to wonder what had driven so many monsters to gather. For him, it was a minor concern. He was more focused on finding the rare item and using his stealth skill to enter the dungeon unnoticed. Inside, he searched treasure chests for the item he wanted, but found only useless equipment. He regretted not asking anyone for help and decided to consult the merchant in the dungeon's magic shop. As night fell, Anui's defenders braced for the anticipated monster attack. Yet, instead of orcs, Haruka strolled down the road, yawning. The class representative and her friends scolded him, frustrated at his frequent disappearances that left them worried. When asked about the missing monsters, Haruka casually mentioned he might have already dealt with them. Despite their thanks, the girls continued to complain that he always got into trouble. Later in the tavern, the guildmaster thanked Haruka for defending the town, but warned him not to be so reckless. Marielle and the representative joined in, leaving Haruka feeling further distanced from his ideal solitary life. He reflected on how the rumored item might let him escape from these constant reprimands. At dawn, Haruka visited the magic item shop and startled the owner, who assumed he was there to cause trouble. Haruka quickly explained his purpose. He was searching for an item that would make others like him. The shopkeeper guessed he wanted the pheromone ring, located on the 50th floor of the dungeon. Eager, Haruka asked how many floors the dungeon held, and learned there were around 100, each with a floor master guarding the way down. Hearing this, he rushed to gather supplies, determined to find the ring and finally gain some peace. While Haruka plotted his next move, two classmates overheard his conversation. The representative quickly learned that Haruka was after the mysterious pheromone ring in the dungeon. The girls resolved to keep him from getting into more trouble and set out to find him. Haruka continued on his way, but soon his perception skill alerted him to approaching figures. It wasn't another monster horde, but instead his furious classmates, led by the determined representative. Exasperated, Haruka asked what they were doing there. She accused him of looking for the pheromone ring. Trying to cover, Haruka lied, claiming he sought Solomon's ring, an item that let him speak to animals. His classmates didn't buy it, and in a moment of desperation, he darted off toward the dungeon. As he entered, a guard warned about the dungeon's dangerous conditions, but with no one willing to listen, he didn't try to stop the large group that followed. Haruka knew things would get messy if the representative found the pheromone ring first, so he sped up. She warned him he might fall into a trap with his reckless pace, but Haruka confidently replied that his luck would keep him safe. Right then, he stumbled over a false wall and tumbled down a deep pit. Desperate to save him, a friend reached out but was too late. Falling through floor after floor, Haruka used earth magic to soften his landing as if onto a cushion. He seemed to have plummeted all the way to the bottom, where the dungeon's final challenges awaited. Although he attempted to scale the walls with airwalking, he couldn't climb back up the endless levels. With no other choice, he resolved to find another exit. Exploring the dark corridors, Haruka discovered he had gained spatial awareness and trap detection skills. Activating these, he ensured the hallway was free of traps and soon came upon a door, heavy with a magical aura, suggesting a formidable presence beyond it. As he opened it, a powerful force pushed him back, but he stood firm. Before him was the dungeon's ultimate challenge, the Dungeon Emperor, a creature at level 100. Meanwhile, on floor 47, his classmates gathered around a bonfire, wondering where Haruka had gone. Each boss they defeated opened a teleportation path back to the dungeon's entrance, so some thought Haruka had returned to the top. However, Oda believed he had reached the bottom, where the Dungeon Emperor made the other monsters stronger. Though it sounded like legend, they decided to brave the lower floors to find him. Back in the lair, Haruka assessed his options. The Emperor's racial classes, Dullahan, Lich, and Undead King, signaled one of the strongest enemies he had ever faced. Realizing he'd have to avoid its long-ranged magic, he decided on close combat. His first strike with his staff was blocked at lightning speed by the Emperor's skeleton frame. Unfazed, he tried again, only to be blocked once more. Haruka knew he had no choice. To escape this dungeon and his looming troubles, he would have to defeat the Dungeon Emperor.